In every country that builds cars likes to build a supercar. The Germans build something like the SLR, of course, the Porsche Carrera. Here in America, we have the Corvette, the Ford GT. The British have the McLaren F1, as well as some other cars. And now the Japanese have a true supercar. This one here, this is the Nissan GTR. This is a well-focused, fantastic handling sports car. My first sports car was a Nissan, or more correctly, a Datsun. I had a Datsun 1600 when I was in high school. Loved that car. It was fast, it handled, tremendous quality, certainly the equal of any of the British sports cars of the day, like the TR3 or the MG. Then they later come out with the Datsun 2000, which had a 5-speed. Oh my God, a 5-speed. How exotic was that? You know, most American cars still had a 3-speed. I was fortunate to have Mr. K himself come to my garage here. Now, if you don't know who Mr. K is, Mr. K was a Japanese man who really kind of thought and acted like an American. Because when the 240Zs first came to this country, they had names like the Lilac and the Fair Lady, and he said, you know something? No American sports car guy is going to buy something called the Fair Lady or the Lilac. You got to give it a macho-sounding name that Americans would like. So he came up with the 240Z, and that's probably why, to this day, they don't name cars Lilac and Fair Lady anymore. They call it something aggressive like the GTR. I think it's fair to say this is probably the first true Japanese supercar. Now, you might argue the NSX was a supercar as well, and it was, but it didn't have the horsepower. 273, 275 horsepower. The Japanese had some sort of gentleman's agreement that nobody would go over that. Well, that's out the window with this thing. 480 horsepower, all-wheel drive, dual clutch. But I'm not an expert in this car, and I'm going to bring in somebody who is. John Weiner. John, come on in. I have to admit, I got a little bored with Nissan cars the last couple of years because there wasn't anything there that I wanted. There were good cars and practical cars, but there wasn't any real sports cars. Much as I like the modern Z, it's a little too lazy, a little too cruisery. You know, this is a hardcore, out-and-out sports car.
The interesting thing about this car, it was actually designed like a race car was designed. They started with the rear of the vehicle. It has a rear transaxle, and the transmission as well as the rear differential are both housed in the rear of the vehicle. They also sit quite low in the chassis, and this creates great weight balance.
And you're all the time all-wheel drive, correct? You can't disconnect and go to two-wheel, can you?
Well, the car starts in rear-wheel drive mode.
Oh, okay.
And then it has the ability to transfer up to 50% of the power.
So if you get wheel spin, it will then transfer to the front? Is that how it works?
Exactly.
Okay. Look at the back of the vehicle here. We have obviously a functional spoiler.
It's a .27 coefficient of drag.
Good, yeah. Good-looking car. Big pipes. It's a pretty good-sized trunk, isn't it?
It's a 9 cubic foot trunk.
Say, honey, look, it's got a trunk. It's perfect. The baby can sit back there, and you shut the thing. And if the baby wants to get out, the baby just pulls this, and he can get out. It's simple. It's a perfect family car, really. Let me ask about these tires. They're 20-inch wheels, that they are?
In fact, 20-inch on all four corners.
But they're not all the same size, right? Different, a little bigger in back?
255 width in the front, 285 width in the rear, and they're standard run-flat tires.
Now, you know, I've watched some other stuff on YouTube, and I understand these guys lap Nuremberg right there with the Porsche Turbo, isn't it?
This car has only been tested by our drivers on the Nürburgring circuit. In our own internal testing, we've beat just about every car on the road.
Before I hit the brakes, tell me about them.
They're 6-piston monoblock front calipers, 4-piston monoblocs on the rear, 15-inch rotors, as big as anything or bigger than anything on the market. This is a 3.8-liter twin-turbo, 480 horsepower motor.
V6, right?
It's a V6, where a lot of our competitors are using either V8s, V12s. The twin turbos are embedded in the exhaust manifold. This car doesn't have one, but it has 2 intercoolers mounted in the front.
Gotcha.
So each bank is essentially running its own turbo system.
And thanks for having a dipstick. You know, I'm one of those guys, when I check the oil, I like to see what it looks like. I hate the press the electronic, but oh yeah, the oil's there, but I can't see it. Don't worry about it, it's okay. No, but I want to see it. No, you can't see it. You know? Now, let me ask you something. Although these aren't even on the market yet, there are already people planning and scheming on how to get more horsepower out of them. I'm told this has been developed with the theory in mind, maybe it's because of the Japanese government, that this is what you get, 480 horsepower. Don't try to get any more because you won't be able to. Is that true?
Well, you know, there's secret codes lurking underneath this powertrain, and
like PlayStation,
the chief engineer of the product has been very adamant that the factory setup of the car is the perfect setup that it comes out with, And they have done everything in their power to keep this unalterable.
Right, okay.
I can't say the people who own the car won't find a way to break through, but that's not our intention.
A lot of people don't know this. I'm in the PlayStation game. The PlayStation guys came to my garage here and they said, hey, can we drive some of your cars and, you know, and tape record the sounds and all that kind of tape record. How old does that sound? And record all the sounds. And I said, yeah, sure. So they explained to me. They had something to do with this a little bit, didn't they?
They did. Mr. Yamauchi, who is the developer of the Gran Turismo games, he actually worked with our company to develop our multi-information display interface you see there.
Take us through this dashboard. This is so complex.
And the first 4 settings here, 1 through 4, those are user configurable. So there's 17 different metrics that you can gauge here based on however the driver wants to configure it. Some have a 3-pod setting, and some have a 6-pod setting. Then the next 7, A through G, those were determined by the factory. The 3 settings here are driver-determined settings for the suspension tuning, the transmission shift time, and then our vehicle differential control. We actually offer a launch mode in this car. The launch mode will allow you to actually put the car at 4,500 RPMs, lift your foot off the brake, and have absolutely perfect launches every time you do this. This is our paddle shifting interface for our 6-speed dual clutch transmission. It's actually 0.2 seconds from the time you activate the shift till you have powers to the wheel. The whole steering column moves. So you can move the whole column up or down, and the wheel telescopes also. The lower position in the shifter allows you to toggle between a full automatic mode. While it's a manual-based transmission, you can let the car drive itself.
Now, is there a manual for like all the electronics?
We do have a manual. It's a little bit large, though.
All right, let me see. Oh, here it is here. Oh, for the electronics. Let me look up traction control. Well, I'm going to take it for a ride, and we'll see what happens. Maybe they'll leave it here for a while. See how it goes. John, thanks a lot. Thanks for the tour.
Thanks, Jay. Enjoy the car.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, what a great job I have. Enjoy the car. Watch me go for a ride, and I'll see you next week. You know, there are a lot of supercars that make more horsepower than this, but very few that put it to the ground as well as this thing does. I've never been a big fan of four-wheel drive because I like to slide around a little bit, but this is pretty good. I mean, it just grips like right now. I mean, 473 horsepower in this feels like about 550 in some other cars. Although it's not a light car by any means, I think this thing's about 3,900 pounds. Boy, it handles itself very well. It's really tight. Boy, it feels like a race car, especially in race mode. Like the steering wheel, good visibility. You know, it's amazing that it happens so effortlessly. You know, I kind of old school. I like the clutch, rolling through the gears. I mean, this thing, you just put your foot in it, and man, it just shifts down. You hear it flip, and then it goes. Even though this is one of the very first ones on the street, everybody seems to know what it is. I'm getting a lot of thumbs up. I'm getting a lot of people beeping at me, especially kids. Kids know what this thing is. And it pulls. You know, if you're old school like I am, you'll probably find the electronics of this car overwhelming. You know, if you grew up in the PlayStation generation, it's phenomenal. It's like a real-life PlayStation game. And I gotta say, I love that double clutch, the way it just sort of shifts. Fantastic. I'm starting to feel like you could get emotionally involved with this car. You know, the trouble sometimes with a lot of Japanese cars is you don't get the emotional thing you get with some of the Germans or some of the Italian cars. And I think if I spent a lot more time with this car, we could get emotionally involved. Let me drop it down a gear and see. Just the pull. Okay, I think I'm emotionally involved. Time to call the wife. Honey, I meant something. Another car. Not to take your place, just something different. Having driven the Bugatti Veyron, which is also a four-wheel drive car, I feel like this is almost a version of that, of course, with a lot less horsepower, but still very, very quick. just, you know, it just becomes infectious. It pulls so hard. People just know to get out of the way.